exciting. Honoring and humbling also. Many great researchers have gone before me and have won this award. So to be mentioned among them is a great honor, and it's very exciting. Really, the start of this goes all the way back to trying to refute some claims for a guy who used to work for us probably 3 or 4 years ago now. And that kind of started me down the path of mold wash research. And then I did some work that I published at AFS Casting Congress in April of 2024. And then I went kind of from there and spidered off into more work, which is what I did here. And this specific project was inspired by a couple researchers that went before me. Ken Murphy and Willie Oyerzabal in particular did some work that kind of set me down this path. And then on top of it, in general, it's just, for me, a desire to deeply understand all of the variables that affect the outcome of the casting process. So there's a two-part process here. The first part is the loss on ignition after drying testing. So the loss on ignition after drying testing gives us a quantifiable number as for the amount of stuff, gas mostly, that's coming off of the wash at a given temperature when it's held there for a given time. So that gives us a number, right? And then from there, I also wanted to do a qualitative study, which is what I did with the test casting, which was that I actually took the combinations of wash that I tested in the LOIAD testing, and then I applied those to the molds and poured metal in them. There isn't necessarily a method that works the best. There are important variables to control, I can tell you that, but I can't tell you there's one be-all, end-all way to dry the mold wash to reduce the quantity of gas that it could potentially form. What I can tell you with water-based wash is that what's really important is the amount of time you hold the wash at a given temperature during the drying process, so long as that temperature is high enough. With solvent-based wash, what I can tell you is that more temperature is better. Time does also play a role, but not as much as in water-based wash. So the reason for a wash is to prevent burn-on, basically, right? So what you're actually doing is you're applying a liquid refractory coating to the mold. So it's similar to what we line the ladles and the furnaces with. So that refractory protects the components of the furnace and the ladle from the molten metal, right? The wash does the exact same thing. So you have to find a way to get the liquid out. With water-based wash, you either stick it in an oven and you hold it for however long, or some people use a flame from a propane torch. You just run it all over there. So that's how you get rid of water. With solvent-based wash, you got a lighter, ignite it. It's pretty simple. Now, you don't necessarily get it all out when you just ignite it, right? There's others, like there's certain areas that won't fully dry because there's not enough oxygen in those areas, specifically like deep pockets, in order for that wash to burn. So usually you'll have to go back in there with like a propane torch and directly hit those spots. But that's kind of how it works, right? You apply it as a liquid with some liquid. In almost all cases, solvent is better. And one of the conclusions we made is that it's not impossible to properly dry water-based wash, but it is significantly easier to properly dry solvent-based wash. For me, this paper, while it answered some questions, raised a lot more questions in terms of wash and how it interacts with the metal we're pouring into our molds. So I definitely want to play around with different wash thicknesses and Baume levels. I would like to see how those different thicknesses affect the ability of the wash to form gases, both quantitatively in an LOIAD test, and then also qualitatively by pouring a test casting. On top of that, I'd also like to test different wash manufacturers against each other. I'd like to see if manufacturer A and B have a substantially different wash in terms of the performance in a test casting. I've done a little bit of lab work that seems to imply that's the case, but the lab work doesn't necessarily mean anything until you actually pour a casting. Last thing I would really like to do is the same thing I did at AFS Metal Casting Congress in 2024, which is look at alumina-based wash and zircon-based wash side by side, see how they compare. We still do not have a great understanding as to how wash influences the metal when they meet in the pouring process. So I definitely want to do more research to try to understand that interaction, and then we can leverage that research to make better castings, more free of gas, more free of oxidation, more free of inclusions.